I'm Mark Halperin.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to New York City, tonight Mark and I are at the centers of the universe for real. It's the early state special, sports fans. Mark's in New Hampshire, and I'm here in Iowa, two states that make up just 1.4% of the entire population of the United States, but have an outsized role in determining who will be its next president. Mark, let's start with the activity where you are in the Granite State, Hillary Clinton's flurry of town halls and Today Show coordination. There were two issues on which she seemed to be particularly aggressive, really on offense. And the first one is gun control. In Manchester, Clinton talked about her new gun control proposal, which has four main points: tightening loopholes for gun shows and online sales, closing additional gaps in background checks, stopping domestic abusers from buying guns, and repealing immunity for gun makers and dealers. And she rounded all of that out with rhetoric like this.
When the NRA was on one of their, tirades and calling the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms enforcers, jackbooted thugs, President George H.W. Bush resigned as an NRA member and said, no, I'm not going to be associated with that. So, ideally, what I would love to see is gun owners, responsible gun owners, hunters, form a different organization and take back the Second Amendment from these extremists.
The second issue where Clinton went on offense was from her interview with the Today Show this morning. That issue is Benghazi, fueled by Kevin McCarthy's comments that the Benghazi committee has dragged down her poll numbers.
This committee was set up, as they have admitted, for the purpose of making a partisan political issue out of the deaths of 4 Americans. I would have never done that. And if I were president and there were Republicans or Democrats who were thinking about that, I would have done everything to shut it down.
Mark, my friend, Hillary Clinton really on offense on those two issues. My question for you, whether doing that, being so aggressive, will help her get her campaign on track.
To quote the last woman on a national ticket, John, you betcha, at least in the short term. The gun issue is an emotional one for Democrats now, probably the most emotional in the country. It allows her to be in league with Martin O'Malley on the far left on that issue, and also to stand up for something she believes in without a doubt. She's always strongest, like most politicians, when she's talking about what she believes in. And on the Benghazi thing, we got a preview of what the hearing is going to be like. She was indignant on the issue of political exploitation of the hearings. Mr. McCarthy is going to regret that comment for a long, long time.
Mark, you mentioned the gun issue and Hillary allowing herself to put herself in the far left and be in league with Martin O'Malley. You left out the person who is, in this rare instance, not on the far left, and that's Bernie Sanders, who has a pretty mixed record from a liberal perspective on gun control and gun measures. She does not have very many places where she can outflank Bernie Sanders to the left, and so she's going to take advantage of this one. I think it's good politics for her. And, we've been talking about the Benghazi thing now for some days, about how much an advantage that gaffe by Kevin McCarthy gives her going into those hearings. Look, she needed some way to turn the page, and maybe these two issues coupled allows her to finally, as we said, get her campaign on track and have her be prosecuting rather than on defense.
She was in fine form today, clearly energized by these two issues. On Saturday, with Al Sharpton, she came in sadness on the McCarthy remarks. Today, she came more in anger.
Right.
All right, after last week's campus shooting in Oregon, the White House and other Democrats, including Hillary Clinton, are renewing their calls for stricter gun control laws. Republicans, including their presidential candidates, on the other hand, have talked more about mental health, the Second Amendment, and the inability of government or society to do much of anything to stop mass killings. John, both sides think this is a political winner for them in 2016. Which side is right?
It could be, Mark, one of these strange questions where both are right in some sense. If you believe that the 2016 election is going to be mostly a base election, and it's always some mixture of a contest for the center and a contest to rile up the base, but the bases in these parties are both really inflamed by this issue in different ways. Republicans, I think, could try to capitalize on this to drive up enthusiasm on their side. Democrats on their side, both of them can get some benefit out of this, even though their positions are totally at odds.
On environment and guns, the right has trumped in every election we've had, midterm and presidential. Maybe this will be the turning point on guns. Democrats are all in. Hillary Clinton is all in on this, even though Al Gore and Bill Clinton were both burned by staking out strong positions on new gun control measures. But I don't get any sense from Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, if he runs perhaps, but certainly from Hillary Clinton, that she's hesitating at all on this. She is full-throated.
There's no question, Mark, I think that the NRA is as powerful as it is less powerful than it was in the days of Bill Clinton and Al Gore. It's not still powerful enough to prevent legislation from getting passed, but the polling on this is so overwhelmingly in favor of at least some forms of gun control and new gun restrictions. And we've seen, obviously, such a wave of horrific violence in so many places that even people who previously were for whom gun control was anathema, they've now moved to a position where they're willing to accept something, or at least say they're willing to accept something, to a pollster. All right. If you're looking for news not about Donald Trump, Dan Balls, he's your guy. He writes in the Washington Post that a melee has broken out between three establishment Republican candidates: the one-time frontrunner Jeb Bush, his former protege Marco Rubio, and the governor Mark embedded with on Friday. That would be Ohio's John Kasich. In short, these three are refocusing their attacks on each other rather than wasting ammo on the Donald. Bush is trashing Rubio's limited experience. Rubio is calling for a non-legacy candidate, and Kasich is saying that his record is better than both of theirs. So, Mark, in the short term, who has the upper hand in this three-way race within a race?
I think Rubio does, because he's being perceived as the hot candidate. He's picking up a lot of support from Scott Walker, financial and grassroots. And so far, no one has, I think, convinced the electorate or the filter that he's too young, he's too inexperienced to be president. But I would say that's going to be the real test, because not just Kasich and Bush, but Trump also, who's already doing it, are going to come hard after Rubio on that, try to knock him out on just being too young.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think there's an additional reason why Rubio has the hot hand, and that is to say that both Bush and Kasich are basically trying to run straightforward establishment campaigns in the traditional mold. They're not ever going to be playing in the anti-establishment lane, in the Tea Party lane, in the anger lane. Rubio, because of his roots in the Tea Party, has a slightly broader potential base in the party. He could appeal to establishmentarians and to grassroots conservatives in a way that Bush and Kasich probably can't. And it may be in the long run that his lack of experience and his youth and his and some of his some of all that, his comparisons with Obama, might cut him short. But in this moment right now, that broader base of appeal gives him, I think, something more to work with than the other two.
The other thing about Rubio, his favorable ratings are quite good. He still has to find a state to win.
Yeah.
Bush, I think, could still win Ohio.
Right.
Most people don't think Iowa, most people don't think he can. Either Kasich or Bush could win here. I think Rubio still has this challenge, is pick a state of the first four and try to make it his state, his dominant state. I still don't see which of the four that is. And as much as momentum and delegates will matter, those early four states, like the two we're in tonight, still matter a lot. All right.
Yeah.
The race for a new Republican leadership team is now getting interesting. Speaker on the way out, John Boehner, has postponed the elections for Majority Leader and Whip and other lower leadership posts, meaning that this Thursday's nomination vote is only going to be for the Speaker slot, which is expected to go to Kevin McCarthy. John, what are the implications of and reasons for Boehner's decision to split up these elections?
Yeah, there's been there's a procedural issue here, Mark, where you can't vote for a leadership post that's not been vacated. And so if you have them all on the same day, it means that there's inability for a real full shakeup of a leadership slate. And conservatives have complained about that in the past. Apparently, Boehner's sort of bowing to that demand to kind of split these two things up to see how McCarthy does. It still looks to me like Kevin McCarthy is the odds-on favorite to be Speaker, despite that big gap the other day. Neither of his challengers, Jason Chaffetz most vocally among them, seem to be in the capacity to win that race. So I don't think in the end it's going to matter at the Speaker's level, but could change the outcome because of the change in the composition of the nature of the races below the Speaker's office, in the leadership panel.
This thing is a huge mess, bigger than most people realize. Yeah, McCarthy's going to be the choice of the Republican conference, but can he get 218 votes on the floor when that vote occurs? And even if he does, I don't think John Boehner is going to bail him out by passing things like increase the debt ceiling, transportation, budget. If McCarthy gets to be Speaker, his life is going to be a living nightmare, regardless of who else is in the leadership, as he tries to pass stuff that must pass before New Year's Eve. Yeah,
I mean, I think that in the end, this is one of these procedural things that that matters in the short term, doesn't matter very much in the long term. I don't think anybody who ends up in Republican leadership going forward, and especially not Kevin McCarthy if he ends up as Speaker, is going to have a very fun time dealing with the same tensions that John Boehner had to deal with over the course of his time as Speaker.
If McCarthy can't get 218, I think Paul Ryan is the only one, even though he doesn't want to be Speaker, is the only one who can come to the rescue. Otherwise, that's going to be a huge mess. And as I said, even if he figures out a way to get to 218, I do not envy the job he faces. I don't think, forget the gaffe that he made, I don't think he's going to have an easy time solving the problems the country's going to confront right away. All right, coming up, what is in the mind of Iowa voters? And Hillary Clinton is the talk of the town hall, her day and mine, in New Hampshire, after this word from our sponsors.
We are joined now by Bloomberg Politics pollster-in-chief Ann Selzer to go over the Iowa horse race. Ann, it's great to see you.
Welcome to Iowa.
Thank you very much. And it's a lovely day here. There's a new Wall Street Journal Marist poll out. So let's talk about that poll, starting with the Republican side. What's jumping out at you from what you read?
Well, the things that are jumping out at me is that at the top of the ticket, it's really pretty much the same people. They're all just down a little bit. So Donald Trump is still the leader, but he's down 5 points. Ben Carson is still in second place, but he's down a few points. What I found especially interesting is sort of the rise of the middle of the pack and sort of people beginning to sort themselves out.
Right.
So you have a modest increase among 3 people. So that's Cruz, Rubio, and Bobby Jindal. And maybe you remember the last time we did...
This is all about you patting yourself on the back here.
An Iowa poll.
Oh,
I said Bobby Jindal was the secret winner out of that poll, and now he's up in the middle. He was at the pre-game poll debate the last time, and now he's right up there.
Well, and you've also been saying for a while on the basis of the Selzer score that Marco Rubio had a lot of room to grow in this state, and now he's starting to actually seem like he's growing a little bit.
And I think he's getting the press support that's also bolstering those numbers too.
For sure. Do you think that in Trump's case, I mean, the perennial question about Trump's floor and his ceiling, right? Yeah. I mean, he's been losing altitude. He's still ahead, but he's losing altitude sort of steadily. Does that help us know now, in retrospect, what his ceiling might have been? And have we yet found out what his floor is?
I don't think we've yet found out the floor or the ceiling, but it is starting to shake itself out. He took up so much of the space. He took up 28 percentage points out of a large field of what was 17 people. But so now there are fewer and people are getting more. Of course he's going to get less.
He's at what number right now in this poll?
He's first.
I know what percentage?
He is at 28.
He's at 28, right? So he's just come down a little.
I'm sorry, he's at 21.
21.
He's down from 28.
Right.
I'm sorry.
That's what I thought. So basically, he topped out here around 30, right? Have you ever seen a candidate who's dropped 10 points in this point in the cycle, then climbing back up and regaining where they were at their previous high?
Oh, now, John, I've seen so many cycles. So
yes, but
it's
it'd
tough.
be unusual.
It is unusual, but if you're the leader.
Right.
And you can drop points if you're still the leader and come back.
Okay, so let's ask about the Democratic side of the same poll.
Let's do.
Put the leaderboard up. Tell us what you learned looking at that.
Well, the race between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders is virtually unchanged.
Right.
She was ahead by 11 points the last time they did this poll. Right. She's ahead by 11 points now. It's shake up a little bit. Right. What's different is if you add Biden into the race. Right. And he's taking 14 points, it looks like, from Hillary Clinton. And Bernie Sanders loses about 8 points to him. So that's what Biden does to that race. He makes it a closer race. She still leads, but Biden makes it a closer nest of candidates.
Her lead at 11 is no doubt, and it's been consistent. She's been ahead of Bernie here as opposed to in New Hampshire.
That's right.
But 11 is not anything like a safe gap for her, right?
And the one other thing that I looked inside to the crosstabs of what they had, one of the things that's interesting, and we saw this in our poll, is that there's a higher not sure among women. Now, these are people who say that they're likely to caucus or that they're in that mix. So they're 21% say they're either uncommitted or not sure. That's a really high number.
Right.
It's 7% among men. And so what's going on with women is what's putting this in flux.
Right. And the other thing that's interesting is I think we now know on the basis of the accumulated polling that it is the case that Biden will, in most instances, draw more from the establishment, it's not, they're, because the Sanders voters are voting for Sanders, they're not protest voters. He seems like he hurts her more. It really matters to Hillary Clinton, this decision he has to make as to whether he's getting in this race or not.
It does.
Right. Okay. Making it brief and concise.
Yes.
Let me ask you a third thing.
Yes.
This same poll did some hypothetical general election matchups.
It did.
I generally try to discount those this far out, but I know you found a couple things you thought were interesting in those numbers.
I did, and it's almost a rock, paper, scissors sort of thing, which is that in a general election matchup, these are both Republicans and Democrats, right. Donald Trump beats Hillary Clinton, but Bernie Sanders beats Donald Trump. Right. So sort of rock, paper, scissors, you would think that that is a signal that Bernie Sanders, who we thought was the kind of candidate that would have a harder time in a general election, actually might not have the hard time that everybody has been saying.
So what explains that? Do you think that, I mean, this is traditionally kind of a purple state. You know, it's been more Democratic in presidential years lately, but it's still, this is not a deep blue state. It has Republican governors, et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
So what explains that? Why Sanders would be better against, in this electorate, why he would do better against Trump than she would do?
Well, I think the chance, this is speculation, but that he may be a stronger cohesive for the Democrats than Hillary Clinton is. Right. So that they are more sort of coming together against Trump. Right. With Hillary Clinton, there's just some misgiving, I think, in those numbers.
All right. Ann Selzer, it is always an extraordinary pleasure to be with you, and especially here in Iowa. When we come back, Mark's magical mystery tour with Hillary Clinton, New Hampshire, after these words from our sponsors.
I spent the day here in New Hampshire covering Hillary Clinton. I haven't been out reporting on Clinton in person in a pretty long time. What's striking is how much she's like a normal candidate these days, and also how much she's not. A normal candidate flips pancakes.
I guess you probably flipped a pancake in your life.
Yes, I have.
Not so normal, a squadron of Secret Service agents watches her every move. This is normal, wonking out at a wonky policy forum on early childhood development.
You know, the famous word gap study, which is a kind of snapshot study of, you know, people who are better stimulated, talked to, and all of that, who then, you know, have heard 30 million more words than a kid from a less advantaged background.
Clinton's communications director, Jennifer Palmieri, says her candidate is, in fact, pretty much normal.
The elements are all there, campaigning like a normal person. A lot of contact with voters, a lot of one-on-one time with voters, big town halls. You see her answering a lot of questions. She loves all that. A lot of interviews as well, a lot of local and national.
Here's another thing a typical candidate does. Clinton huddled with her staff to come up with a soundbite to make sure her gun message got on the news. What's the most obvious way to do that? Mention a certain Republican frontrunner.
Mr. Trump was asked about it and said something like, you know, things like that happen in the world. And Governor Bush said, yeah, stuff happens. No. That's an admission of defeat and surrender to a problem that is killing 33,000 Americans.
But the size of her entourage and the unusually controlled formality of Clinton's interactions with voters makes her seem less like a challenger and more like a defending champ.
She has a huge amount of Secret Service protection, that she has this very cautious staff, that when she's on the rope line, she's not answering reporter questions, she's just sticking on message, and that's really different from the way that a lot of other candidates work.
Here's another example of how Clinton is an unusual candidate. A reporter she's known for almost a quarter century, standing inches away from her, asks her questions, and she pretends she can't hear him. Secretary Clinton, what's your message? What's your message to the NRA, Secretary Clinton? May I ask you a question about guns, Secretary Clinton?
How are you?
Secretary Clinton, what's your message to the NRA? But like a normal candidate, Clinton will take questions from a New Hampshire voter on another rope line, even if it's the same question that the reporter asked.
Question, what's your message for the NRA? I know you've been talking about gun control.
Yeah, I just did a town hall about that. And look, my message is not to them or for them. My message is to the American people. It is time that we stood up together for common sense gun safety measures to end the epidemic of gun violence. And that is going to be an issue that I
emphasize in the campaign, and that I'm going to work as hard as I can to get something done in Washington, but it has to come from the bottom up. It has to come.
That voter asked the exact same question as the reporter. Coincidence? I don't think so. I tried to ask Hillary Clinton what her message was to the NRA. She wouldn't answer me. So what'd I do? I went to the middle lady. What'd you do?
I asked her the question.
How'd it work out?
It was great. She gave me a great answer, and she interacted with me, and she gave me an answer that I value, and I think it made sense.
You won, I won, and Hillary Clinton won.
I like it. It was perfect.
John, in my entire career, I've never done that, of asking a voter to ask my question. But I think with Hillary Clinton, it may become my common practice. I'm wondering whether you think, watching the piece there and watching her lately, whether you think she's getting better as a candidate.
I think she looked pretty good today, and I think you've got to attribute some of it to the fact that she is now suddenly having this opportunity that we talked about earlier to go on offense and not be constantly on defense and on her back foot. I don't know. I'd like to see a consistent performance increase, a better performance on her part before one renders judgment. I've seen her give a couple really good speeches this year. There she looked better in a retail setting than she has for a while, but she still seems not like she's not firing fully on every cylinder. We'll have to see a little more before we can make that judgment. What's your thought about that, Mark?
I thought she was very strong today. You know, when she gets into a problem, everybody focuses on the negative. But the fact is, if you compare her in terms of Sunday show appearances, tough interviews, different kind of voter situations, yes, they're more controlled than most candidates. But the fact is, she's a pro, and she handles a lot of these candidate situations on the ground in Iowa and New Hampshire as well or better than anyone in the race. The press often forgets that or ignores that.
Let me ask you this question real quick. When I was with her, we were out here for the state fair. I saw her at the state fair. She spent that day, and I noticed, the difficulties of her navigating the state fair. This kind of keys back into your point about her being an unusual candidate. In a lot of ways, I think most of that, the unusualness, the entourage, the Secret Service, they're all to her detriment. Do you think there's any way in which her being unusual in that regard does play to her benefit as well?
It makes her seem, I think, more presidential, more regal in a positive way. And I have to say, her agents are very skilled. They're protecting her, but they're giving her enough room to interact with voters. They're a very skilled group of people, and my hat's off to them. And it's to her benefit because it keeps her away from looking too regal. We'll be right back, so don't go anywhere.
Mark, the secret word is go. So tomorrow morning, go wake up early and go watch Bloomberg's new morning show, Bloomberg Go, at 7 a.m. Eastern.
And speaking of tomorrow, we've got Congressman Mick Mulvaney, Republican of South Carolina, here to talk about the leadership fight. All that and all the day's political news right here from New Hampshire and Iowa. We say sayonara.